Welcome, everyone. Or you want to get us started? Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Taketa with some announcements. Here at the Wharfinger building, we're upstairs. The microphones are on throughout the meeting. So please speak one person at a time. And in this space, please speak up so that the people who are here with us can hear you. Online community members who are participating in public comment periods, please come to the podium if you are able. And let's see, online participants, click the raise hand button in the webinar controls. Phone participants, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And if you could, please raise your hands early so that staff can see that you would like to speak. We don't want to miss you. Emailed public comments have been received and are being accepted at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org until the chair closes the public comment period for that agenda item. And people who are participating from the community remotely, if your meeting connection is disrupted, please try to notify us if you can by calling or texting 707-382-7336, number on your screen, 707-382-7336, or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. Okay, Chair Bauer, go ahead.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the September 25th, 2025 meeting of the RCEA Board of Directors to order. Okay, we have a roll call, please.
Yes, Chair. Director Arroyo?
Here.
Chair Bauer?
Here.
Director Diaz?
Here.
Director Garachi?
Here.
Director Jorgensen?
Here.
Director Moore-Gaina is not here yet.
Brett, I'm online.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. We have a remote director, so
Okay.
we'll be doing roll call votes today. And Director Moore-Gaina, can you please let me know if there's anyone 18 years or older in the room with you and the nature of your relationship?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you so much. Director Schaefer?
Here.
Director Scafani? Here. Director Tuttle?
Here.
Director Wilson?
Here.
And Director Wheeler?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. So I guess we need to do a roll call for remote director participation.
Right.
Right. And that's item what? 1.1, approved teleconference participation request for this meeting by director pursuant to Brown Act revisions of AB 2449 due to emergency circumstances. That's not
I
right.
don't believe so.
No.
Director Moore-Gaina, this is just cause you are on travel for work, agency work?
No, I've been sick with a viral infection. I didn't want to contaminate anybody.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this is a medical just cause, and so no vote is necessary.
Good.
No vote.
Okay. Okay, we'll move to item 2, reports from member entities. Anybody have anything to report? No? Okay. Item 3 is oral written communications. Do we have any written communications?
There were comments received for item 9.1, no comments for items not on the agenda.
What? Item 4 is the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, board members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. Do we have any items we want to remove? And nobody requested any. Can I have a motion?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. I guess we'll be doing roll call, right?
Okay, Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Chair Bauer,
Aye.
Director Diaz,
Yes.
Director Garachi,
Yes.
Director Jorgensen,
Yeah.
Director Moore-Gaina,
Yes.
Director Scafani,
Yes.
Director Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson, and Director Wheeler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. We'll now move on to item 6, old business, which is 6.1 financial audit for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2025 and 2024. We have business planning and finance director Jody Dobson and Ryan Thieler and Baker Tilly's remote. Okay. We're not.
So I'm Lori Biondini, I'm the director of business planning and finance. This is a really exciting moment because we, have RCEA officially caught up financial audits. You all have heard the results and seen audited financial statements for 6 years worth of I guess, info this calendar year. And but now you won't hear from me, hopefully, for like another year. So that's exciting. But now our auditors, Baker Tilly, are going to do the required presentation of our most recent financial statement audit. I will have them take it away if they're on. Yep.
We are here. Thank you so much for having us here with you tonight virtually. So my name is Jody Dobson, and I'm a principal with Baker Tilly in our energy and utilities practice, which focuses on serving utilities nationwide, electric, water, wastewater, etc. I am a new name and face for you. I think you've gone through the last several audits with Bethany Ryers, but due to some requirements in the state of California to have principal rotation on engagements after a certain number of years, I've stepped into the role at this time. I do have Ryan Thieler with me tonight, who has been the manager on the engagement and is providing some continuity as well, so that we don't overwhelm your team with all of the new questions at once. So it's kind of a nice balance. If we look at the next slide here, what I'd like to touch on tonight are the results of the audit process for the 2024 and 2025 audits. And then also go over the required communications to the governing body as outlined by the AICPA, and also just bring to your attention some information on future accounting standards that will impact the statements in future years, and then answer any questions that you might have on the information. So the next slide, we start with our responsibilities as the auditor. We start by planning the audit so that we can perform it with the ultimate goal to obtain reasonable assurance that the basic financial statements are free from material misstatement. Reasonable is a high level of assurance, but it's not absolute. We don't go through and reperform every transaction. That just would not be practical, or it would be cost prohibitive to do. So what we start with is understanding your transactions, your balances, your processes, to allow us to assess the risk of where there might be misstatements in the financial statements. This is a combination of the inherent risk of different types of transactions, as well as looking at internal controls to assess where there may be control risk. And ultimately, all of that information allows us to design our audit procedures to make sure that we're obtaining enough evidence to issue our audit opinion. So then in our final field work, we're performing those audit procedures on the full year's worth of activity or the year-end balances. Along the way, we do look at accounting policies and estimates to make sure that they are compliant with the generally accepted accounting principles in the United States, or GAAP, as well as consistent from year to year in their application, and that they're using the right methodologies and inputs in the estimates. So ultimately, we're looking to express an opinion on the financial statements, as noted here. But we do note that this doesn't change management or the board's responsibility for financial statements. And so your responsibility really comes in the designing of the procedures and the policies and the controls, and maintaining processes that are following those. Processing the various transactions, maintaining the records and the reconciliations, and presenting the financial statements that follow GAAP. And so we're coming in to test that and give an opinion on that. Our next slide talks a little bit about the planning and scope of the audit. So here, where is our focus during the audit process? We're looking to start by understanding your environment and thinking here about key transaction cycles, which I'll touch on the next page, as well as where might there be significant estimates. So for example, in your financial statements, things like unbilled revenues or allowance for uncollectible accounts are significant estimates. And then also, are there new accounting standards that need to be implemented? And there were 2 new accounting standards for this most recent set of financial statements, GASB 101, which related to compensated absences, and 102, which relates to disclosures for certain concentrations and constraints when they meet very specific criteria. And I can tell you that both of those were evaluated and did not have a significant impact on the financial statements. But it's always good to know that management's gone through the process of evaluating those. In addition, the audit incorporates a concept of materiality, as we're looking to say, are the financial statements materially correct? And really, there's a number of qualitative and quantitative factors that are looked at in this process of evaluating what's material. But the easiest way to think about it is what is something that would impact a user's evaluation of the financial statements. So if that amount was different by the identified amount, or what amount would it have to be different by, where a user may make a different evaluation or decision based on that. So that's really what we're looking at. Not trying to have things that are trivial or just rounding, if you will, impact the evaluation. The next page, we talk a little bit more of some of those key transaction cycles. And I don't think there's anything on here that's a surprise that we might be looking at it. But areas that are definitely a focus is the cash and investments, because there's significant activity there. Revenues and receivables, the billing cycle, again, looking at unbilled estimates and uncollectible accounts, and the revenue recognition process. General disbursements, both the controls over that process as well as the timing of recognition and the classifications. And then financial reporting and disclosures is a key area, because that's really comes down to all of the information in the ultimate financial statement, making sure that that's not only compliant with the standards, but it's complete, it's accurate, and it's understandable. So as we went through this rigorous process, what were the ultimate results of the audit? We've got this on the next slide. Our audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. As we've said, the objective was to make sure the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And your financial statements received what we call an unmodified or a clean audit opinion. That's the highest level of assurance that we can give. So letting you and any outside readers know that they're a fair presentation of the financial position at year end and the results of operations for the year. We do note in the bottom box here, there were 2 material weaknesses that were identified and reported in the required communications this year. The first one related to financial statement close process and financial reporting, I think is fairly consistent and is also fairly common in organizations that have a smaller staff. Really, the standards would say that when we come in, the full set of financial statements should be completed, reviewed internally, and waiting for us. And that just isn't always practical to have staff to be able to do that, have the time to do that on a once a year basis. So we assist with that. And then the second item here was related to the allowance for doubtful accounts. That this year it was identified that the amount in that allowance wasn't being reviewed in a timely basis compared to the balance of AR. And so as management went through and reevaluated that, there was a significant adjustment made to that balance. And I think processes there have already been put in place to evaluate that more frequently and more timely moving forward. So the next slide has a number of the required communications. We've already talked a little bit about the auditor's responsibility and board responsibilities. I do want to highlight the word independence there as well. We have to make sure that we're independent in order to issue that financial statement opinion. And so that's something that we work very carefully on. while management may reach out for questions throughout the year, get advice on implementation of new standards, or discuss new transactions, we make sure that any services we provide are not impairing our independence. We talked about the 2 new accounting policies that did not have an impact for this year, but were evaluated and implemented by management as needed. And then also those key estimates that we're looking at the methodologies, the significant inputs, making sure that they're compliant and consistent. And there were no concerns there after the adjustment was made to the allowance. When we look at the accounting policies and the financial statement disclosures, we spend a lot of time reviewing that, and we had no concerns there. There were 4 audit adjustments this year. One was a reclassification for reporting line item. 2 were kind of, I would say, a typical year-end true-up that needed to be made. And then the last one was that allowance update that was the largest amount. So overall, the impact there outside of the allowance, which is typically a year-end only entry, was not significant. And so I think you're getting good information throughout the year. And then the last box there at the bottom, if there was anything that came to our attention related to compliance concerns, potential fraud, going concern, unique transactions that didn't have guidance, anything of that sort, we would be required to report that to you. And as you go through that audit results document, you'll see there's a lot of we have nothing to report. So there was no other findings or concerns. That's the no news is good news section. So looking to the future, our next slide identifies 2 new GASB standards that will be affecting your financial statements for 2025 and 2026. I'm sorry, 2026. And so these are the financial reporting model improvements. That first one will make some rearrangements to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position or the income statement. It's kind of redefining what falls into operating, non-operating, and adding some other categories and subtotals just to provide more clarity and consistency between governmental entities. There's also some guidance in here on the MD&A, trying to provide some better instructions for that, and a few other terminology changes. So nothing drastic, but might make some minor impacts. And then standard 104 relates to a disclosure of specific capital assets regarding the level of detail with leased or subscribed assets, intangible assets, as well as assets that are held for sale in the capital assets. So again, nothing that impacts the day-to-day accounting, but some things that you might see in future financial statements. But with that, I do want to thank management for their assistance in the audit process. There's a lot of information we ask for. They're great about getting us everything, and to be able to be here and reporting to you at this time is really exciting. I don't know if there were any questions on either of the documents that you received.
Do you have any questions? No? All right. Should go out to public any public comment? Anybody online? All right, any board discussion?
Just say it's always a pleasure when these are really boring reports.
Yes, thank you.
It's delightfully straightforward.
All right, well, if we don't have any questions, no public comment, thank you, Lori. Anybody want to make a motion?
We have a very picky clerk. I'll make a motion to approve the audit report for probably a year that could be on the board for me. No. Lori, maybe Lori's less picky.
There it is.
Yeah, to accept and approve the RCEA financial statements, June 30th, 2025 and 2024, and the independent auditors report by Baker Tilly.
Okay. Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Chair Bauer,
Aye.
Director Diaz,
Yes.
Director Garachi,
Yes.
Director Jorgensen,
Yes.
Director Morgaina,
Yes.
Director Scafani,
Yes.
Director Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Wheeler,
Yes.
unanimous motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for the great.
Right.
Thanks all. Bye.
Right now. With that, community choice energy business, we do have a quorum,
Yes, you do.
correct? All right. We'll move on to old business, which we don't have any actually. New business, 9.1 long-term renewables portfolio standard request for offers. And we have a senior power resources manager, Jocelyn Way.
And just before we get started, as loud as possible for all of us. It's hard to hear over here.
You're good at projecting. So, good afternoon, board members. So this is, we issue a solicitation for new power resources contracts about once a year. So the last one you approved was in December. That was our local of last year. That was our local storage solicitation. This one is a little bit more vanilla. So it's going to be for renewable, just generic renewable portfolio standard resources. Next, oh, I can change the slides. So the objective of this solicitation is just to get more long-term renewable energy contracts, especially now that Sandrini is online. We have a little bit more room left in our portfolio in the midterm years. And so, pursuant to our goal to get 100% of our portfolio under renewable contracts by 2030, we are going to be, going out and seeking more of those. Also, the state, of course, has goals for renewable development and incremental generation capacity to improve reliability on the grid. And then lastly, the sunsetting federal tax credits are a major cause in kind of the timing of this solicitation, because we have heard that there are some projects out there that are able to take advantage of those in their kind of sunsetting years. Oh, it's a little bit small text there, but so for projects to be eligible for this solicitation, they have to be, state RPS certified resources. And we are requiring that their generation resources either stand alone or paired with storage. So they have to be able to supply energy and renewable energy certificates at a minimum to RCEA. We're setting a ceiling on resources of 100 megawatts, just reflective of, our size and our customer load needs. And then we're requiring that projects be interconnected to or able to be imported into the California Independent System Operator grid. Our preferred criteria, so this is what we kind of reflect in our scoring process for projects. And so we state kind of a set of preferred criteria that are pretty standard at this point. You guys have seen them before. So that they can deliver, in addition to energy and RECs, that they can deliver resource adequacy. We are allowing non-RA resources in this solicitation, but they're going to score better if they can provide RA. We also prefer, obviously, projects that are mature in development. They have a lot less development risk, and they're going to score better in our evaluation in kind of a couple different categories, which I'll show you in a minute. And then we always express preference for projects located in our service area or near our service area. And then lastly, we are expressing a preference explicitly for community and or environmental benefits that are above and beyond just your run-of-the-mill climate benefits of renewable projects. And we list some examples of those types of benefits that we're looking for in the RFO protocol. So this is the scoring criteria. You all have seen the, a similar kind of breakdown of the points before. So we weight development risk the most. So that's broken down into site control, interconnection, permitting, and equipment procurement. So a project that is, far along in those departments will score pretty well. We also score pretty highly price and economic value, and then also compliance needs. So if it satisfies a particular, RPS, RA, those types of state compliance requirements. We're giving 20 points for respondent experience and 15 points for environmental impacts and safety impacts. And then 10 points for that location that I mentioned earlier, and then community benefits. So we are proposing to issue this next week, assuming approval tonight. And offers would be due about a little over 3 weeks later. So that's kind of a typical time for solicitations to be open. The last solicitation we left open for 3 months because we were looking for local projects and we wanted to allow a little more time for that. But this one, it's going to be a pretty much statewide solicitation. You've got the protocol, access to the power purchase agreement that we would issue with this solicitation. And then there are a couple forms listed up there that we don't provide the board for review because they're really just templates for respondents to fill out, and they don't really contain terms and conditions of the solicitation. I will point out that the exclusivity agreement does contain some terms and conditions, but it is unchanged from the last solicitation. So I can, we do have a version of that on our website. And then as with prior solicitations, we're looking for the board to create an ad hoc offer review committee. We're going to keep the workload of that committee hopefully as light as possible. Last time we did an email vote on the short list, but typically the committee is there, one, to review any confidential information in the offers, and then approve the short list. And then if after shortlisting during negotiations, anything changes with the offers, we sometimes come back to that committee and ask for reapproval of certain responses. And so we are aiming to bring the shortlist to that committee around mid-November, just before Thanksgiving break. And then full contracts, we're hoping to bring to the board next spring. And there's two of, I believe, 3. Yeah, there's 3. So this outlines, number 2 there outlines what the board would be delegating to the ad hoc offer review committee for approvals.
Do you have any questions? Natalie?
I remember if in the past, I mean, so it's been a while since we did this process, even though we had a solicitation for other types of projects. So does the ad hoc need to be comprised, I guess this is a board decision really, of CCA voting members only, or can it be comprised of any members of the board in an advisory capacity? Nancy's.
Yeah, we're huddling. This is a process that's unique to this board, so the board can define the process however it wants to. Recognizing all the considerations that go into CCA decision making, and I know that's an ongoing conversation here. So the short answer is you can put whoever you want on an ad hoc committee, provided they have delegated authority to to review the solicitations and make a determination of who to bring back to the full board. Because the full board is going to be making the ultimate decision.
Didn't we have 3 last time? 3 board members who did this? You might remember?
Don't remember.
That's it at one point.
Is it 4?
And I will say that Director Wu has served on a couple of these.
I served on 1, I think.
It's good.
Could I also just note, we received public comment on this item.
Okay.
Good.
Any other questions?
I also forgot to mention that there's a little error in the protocol you were given in your packet. It didn't include the location, just the word location and in the community benefits scoring criteria. So we're going to edit that when we issue it. That was just a holdover from the last solicitation, which was local only.
I have a question about the ad hoc. Some of the ad hocs I've participated in had great meetings and lots of discussion, and then other ad hocs have had no meetings or discussion where, you know, each individual was asked to review, in some cases, a lot of material and make a determination. So I wonder if there's a criteria for this ad hoc. Will there be in-person meetings? Will there be discussion amongst the group, or is it going to be individual?
It's really up to the committee, how they would like to meet. I think I did a poll last time and asked how people prefer to meet, and everyone selected remotely, or sorry, everyone selected to do an email vote. Last time. But yeah, it'd certainly be up to you all.
We did email last time. Yeah.
I just asked because it's partly for the time required. And when you're diving into some of these topics that, you know, you're not an expert in, I find it really helpful to have those discussions where you're learning from the group and getting, you know, questions answered and helping to form your position based on this group dynamic and group education. So that to me is an important piece before I volunteer for something.
Any other questions? Okay. Everybody a chance to review the public comment that we received? Any feelings about that, or
Sorry?
any feelings about it, or
Both the comments were related to opposition to including biomass.
yes?
And inform whatever the ad hoc committee is going to review. We don't even, you know, at this point know if we're going to even get those solicitations. So I think it's a little premature, but something important to take into consideration. Sure. I will also offer that I'm happy to be on the ad hoc committee. I've done it before for this, but might not be the best person to schedule a synchronous in-person or Zoom meeting because I'm the worst at that, so.
Anybody else interested? I'll do it.
3.
That's 3.
It's great.
Who's the third?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Richard Tuttle was the third person?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We can have 4, I think.
Very large, yeah.
Yeah, so volunteer Sherry. No.
We could have an alternate do it.
Yeah, we can make her all.
I'm not suggesting she be an alternate. I'm saying he was in.
Great.
You could certainly, I don't think there's a reason why we can't do that.
Yes, there is.
So it's Sherry and then Tom is the alternate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, you run into the problem of having 2 decision makers from one jurisdiction, and we can't open up that.
To play devil's advocate, they can't vote on it anyway because they're not.
Make it sort of. Yeah, I mean, yes, I still think that as a separate consideration, you should not have alternates on these.
And it means you bring full contracts, the full board votes on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to ask for clarification, there is no 4th member currently then, is that right?
Yeah, just. Yeah.
You know, the other thing about appointing somebody in absentia, like to be as an alternate, is you don't need to because you're not trying to establish a quorum. You know, you usually use that when you are worried about having the minimum number of a subgroup that can participate. So I would also advise against appointing somebody who's not present because It's just not necessary and
As we've learned that I was gonna say,
probably.
I think 3 is a great number.
There you go.
Fine.
3 volunteers is even better.
Okay, with that, you wanna, and they want to entertain a motion and
I'll make the motion.
You can't see this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could move.
Make it
Motions, maybe.
The subcommittee comprised of.
We address.
yeah.
Oh, we did.
Okay, we got rules to address.
I would suggest that the motion be actually made because we're under CCE business, that you actually make and vote on this as a CCE board.
Can you not make them?
You're on this committee. Sorry.
Sorry, I
There's not-
asked in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I will make a motion, can I just, to approve the staff recommendation with the ad hoc committee of myself, Director Grache and Director Tuttle.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second, roll call vote.
And you do have the option to do a randomized one, but that's only at your discretion, the board. If it doesn't matter, you would like that, okay. Then Director Diaz,
Yes.
Director Arroyo.
Yes.
Director Schaefer.
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Tuttle.
Yes.
Chair Bauer,
Yes.
Director Jorgensen,
Yes.
and Director Scafani.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
And Heidi was a yes too.
All right, we'll move on.
Did you capture my vote?
This is CCE business, so.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to old business, report on federal government activity. We have, thank you.
And Faith, I'll just ask, remind again, biggest voice possible.
Wow.
Good.
Right, well, I'm not a singer like Jocelyn's. You have to bear with me. We're gonna go over a general summary of themes related to federal activity that we've been tracking. A little bit of a deeper dive on offshore wind developments and just staff's approach to tracking this and advocacy. So to start, we started tracking federal activity to the board in February after a flurry of executive orders right after the inauguration. The board requested regular updates on federal activity at that point. And since then, almost every month in your board packets, you have had a federal activity staff report, which I highly encourage you to. Also happy to answer any questions on those past reports or reports as they come out, if that's ever needed. So I'm going to kind of break it out by branch of government. So as of September 20th, President Trump's second administration has 205 total orders, and those are executive orders only. I'm not counting presidential memorandums in those. So if that pace continued through the end of the year, that would be a rate of 306 executive orders per year, which is only matched historically by FDR. For context, the average rate of executive orders per year since the start of the 20th century, which is kind of when executive orders hit like a stabilization point, is 122 per year. So it's a stark increase, which is why we've been tracking the federal government a little bit more than past administrations. So actions from the executive branch have included introductions of tariffs, changes to federal grant making, changes to environmental permitting, proposals related to changes for EPA GHG policy, and consideration over artificial intelligence and data center load planning. From the legislature, the biggest change we've seen is the passage of House Resolution 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And the biggest impact of that were changes to tax incentive deadlines and foreign materials usage in renewable energy projects, as well as a loss of customer-facing tax credits. We're also 6 days away today from a federal shutdown if Congress does not pass either a short-term funding bill or 12 separate full year funding bills by the end of the day on September 30th. From the judicial branch, we've seen a lot of litigation related to all the items that I've already mentioned, as well as some litigation related to how electric vehicle efficiency is calculated as compared to combustion engines. So all these changes combined lead to increased costs and timelines for development of new renewable resources, largely due to tariffs and tax credit changes, risks of decreased customer side adoption of renewable technologies and electric vehicles, and other regulatory risk if the EPA's greenhouse gas endangerment finding is reversed. And changes to permitting may make some projects like solar and wind more challenging to permit on federal land, but there may be some streamlining for project types like geothermals. So I'm going to have a little bit of a special focus area on offshore wind and terrestrial wind. There's an attachment to the board packet that you can review as well that goes deeper into that. So that started with the presidential memorandum, temporary withdrawal of all areas on the outer continental shelf from offshore wind leasing and review of the federal government's leasing and permitting practices for the wind projects, which has led to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's rescission of all new leasing on existing areas that were designated for offshore wind and ended the designation of new lease areas for offshore wind. Since then, there's been a number of stop work orders for multiple offshore wind facilities in various stages of permitting and construction. I've highlighted a few of those in that attachment. Some of these have been reversed either due to litigation or negotiation, and some of these are still have a stop work order and ongoing litigation. And there's been a handful of lawsuits related to onshore wind energy as well, filed in response to this presidential memorandum. There's also been impacts related to House Resolution 1. The loss, and I mentioned this on a previous slide, but the loss of tax credits has made it so that on and offshore wind can be less economic. And there also was a sunset of the Department of Energy's Interregional Transmission Planning Group. The Department of the Interior also issued an order ordering additional scrutiny for wind and solar permitting, which can make those slower to get through the permitting process. And I think the biggest local impact is the withdrawal of funding to the Humboldt Bay Heavy Lift Terminal. There was a U.S. Department of Transportation grant of $426 million, and that was rescinded or terminated for various parts of that funding. However, I do want to close with kind of an optimistic note for offshore wind. So to keep some momentum for offshore wind in California, the state budget, there was kind of a budget linear bill that was just signed on Friday that includes $2.5 million dedicated for offshore wind transmission planning, $4 million dedicated to the Cademo project, and $225 million dedicated towards waterfront facility improvement programs. And those are all going to be administered by the CEC. I do want to caveat that not all of that funding is dedicated for Humboldt County. There are other areas that are related to offshore wind development in the state that will be competing for those funds. And I also want to call out that the Harbor District is meeting from 6 to 8 to discuss the loss of funding today. So try to be 2 places at once. So I'm going to close with our approach for advocacy and kind of a review of how other CCAs are conducting their advocacy as well. So currently, RCEA staff largely just monitor federal advocacy, and a lot of that work is for the preparation of the board reports that you receive. In addition to tracking, we attend a weekly CalCCA, that's California Community Choice Association federal discussion group. This discussion group is kind of a smaller group than other CalCCA initiatives, and it's focused, again, more on tracking. That's a trade association that engages in CCA programs around the state. And CalCCA as a whole doesn't engage in federal issues. It's not like they're filing any actions against previous policies that I mentioned. So it's kind of more occasionally one CCA will draft a letter, and then CCAs that are affected by that related issue sign up here and there. We also meet with our federal legislators on an ad hoc basis, which historically has corresponded to about once a year. A recent example of a topic area that we met over was the terrace project. So what are other CCAs doing? So tracking, beyond staff level tracking, there are some softwares out there that we are looking into at the recommendation of other CCAs that may allow us to more easily or earlier on in the process flag issues that might affect RCEA operations. And this can help us identify when those ad hoc meetings with our legislators are needed, or where procurement and other specific projects may be effective. There's also group engagements. So many CCAs participate in LEAN, which is Local Energy Aggregation Network. They're a nonprofit dedicated to helping CCAs advocate across the entire nation. So they're kind of like a CalCCA, but on a federal basis. And there are CCA programs in a variety of states with a variety of policy goals. So they're kind of trying to work holistically to make sure that customers around the nation have community choice in their resource development. And then lastly, there is individual CCA engagement. So this is largely for larger CCAs. Some CCAs will opt to have on-staff lobbyists or contract lobbyists permanently on their payroll. So staff here, we are exploring currently additional tracking softwares and lean membership as options that may be a best fit for RCEA and the level of engagement that we need at this time. So I welcome any feedback and questions. Thank you.
Anybody have a question?
This is Heidi. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to offer a statement. So I serve on the Community Advisory Committee for the Heavy Lift Terminal. And the way that Rob articulated the impact from the DOT funding loss was that the project was on pause. It was on hold. It's just on pause until they find identified funding sources. And they're actively working, as Faith indicated, with CEC and the CNRA on trying to leverage Prop 4 funds. And we are actively engaged in a conversation about the importance of needing to get a lobbyist in support of this project in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just comment that I was pleased to see the demo project receive some, maybe not the desired amount, but get a boost. So hoping to see and learn from that. And we all, voted to support that project in our own way, but that's a project that's on the Central Coast that'll have be basically a demonstration project. And an opportunity to learn about, what it looks like to deploy this.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Faith. Any public comment? No online. All right. We were just receiving reports, so no vote, right?
This actually has an action attached to it, a received federal activity report.
Yeah. Okay. Good, thanks. Okay, move on to item 10.2, annual Humboldt Sawmill Company Alternative Biomass Use Report. Power Resource Director, Richard Engel. Good afternoon. I will try to project as well as my colleague.
So this has become an annual exercise that we go through in keeping with the MOU that we have with Humboldt Sawmill Company. So many of you have seen something like this in previous years. The MOU was adopted back in 2021, and that came out of direction that we got from the board to just seek ways to get more transparency in our relationship with Humboldt Sawmill Company in response to community concerns about emissions from the plant, especially. So the MOU calls for there to be an annual report and meeting to discuss our contractual relationship with Humboldt Sawmill Company and possible alternative uses of the feedstock that's currently used in their biomass plant, and to look at data on their energy production, the feedstocks that are used to run the plant, and the emissions from the plant. So the last couple of years, after having somewhat Spartan data sharing from HSC the first time around. They've been more forthcoming. I think they've just taken the position that we're going to give RCEA everything that the public could get through a Public Records Act request of the Air District. They provide us with sourcing info broken down by the geographic origin and the supplier of the materials. They talk about how much biomass and how much auxiliary diesel fuel gets used, what their electric output is, how it's some part of it used on site, the thermal energy recovered for industrial use. So just kind of a breakdown of the energy. They disclose the emissions. They disclose notices of violation that they've gotten from the North Coast Air Quality District and HSC's responses to those notices. And then boiler test data, cogeneration monitoring reports, an audit on the opacity monitoring that's done of the emissions, and then throughputs of the plant, a boiler compliance test report, and toxic hotspots reporting timeline and status summary. By request of one of the members of the Biomass Technical Advisory Group, which is kind of the first line reviewers of this material when it comes out, we also included a petition. I'm sorry, I need to correct something it says on the screen here. It says HSC provided. It wasn't HSC who provided it. It was actually members of the Biomass Advisory Group who provided the petition that was submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency, submitted by EPIC, Environmental Conservation Center, and Humboldt Coalition for Clean Energy. And this was objecting to a proposed modification of the Title V air permit for the Humboldt Sawmill company. The data was reviewed by the Biomass Technical Advisory Group that was put together a few years ago as part of our 2019 update of our strategic plan. And also the Community Advisory Committee looked at the materials before they came to you. Our staff, specifically Forest and Botany on our Power Resources team, put together some visualizations that I'll show you in a minute. We do not dive into analyzing the data. The idea is to make it available for the Biomass Technical Advisory Group for any analysis they want to perform on it, pass on to the CAC and the board. Geographic origin is one of the things that we get information on. And you can see that going back in these graphs, I'm sorry, the dates on the bottom are quite small, but it's going back to 2021 up to this year, and just showing that the orange is material sourced from outside Humboldt County, and the blue is what's sourced from within Humboldt County. We consider this relevant because a lot of the value proposition that's put forward for procuring biomass power is that it's helping to deal with waste material generated locally in Humboldt County. And to the extent that it's not coming from Humboldt County, that's less relevant to RCEA strategically to be procuring it. Also, we asked them to disclose how much of the material is coming from their own forest lands versus sourced externally. They sometimes do get, just green waste material from power line right-of-way clearing. There have been times when, one example is a few years ago when the Fairhaven biomass plant had an extended period when they were offline and there was a lot of stockpiled material there. They obtained that material for use at the Scotia plant. But again, the great majority of the material is coming from Humboldt Redwood Company and Mendocino Redwood Companies on forest lands. In terms of emissions, this graph just shows year by year since 2016, and 2017, I'll note, was the year when RCEA first started procuring power from the plant. This shows how many metric tons of CO2 equivalent were emitted per megawatt hour of generation. So this sort of is, emissions efficacy, if you will. And we don't really see a distinct time trend happening there, which I just bring up because we have had people comment that the plant is, becoming more emissions intensive over time, but that doesn't actually seem to be the case, at least from the data that we have access to. This shows the greenhouse gas emissions, and it's broken down between the blue bar, by far the larger part of the bars, is the emissions associated with the biomass combustion, and the other color, the red or orange there, is non-biomass material, which means specifically diesel fuel. 2015 is the year there was practically zero, because that was when it was in an ownership transition. It was essentially offline for that year. So 2017 onwards, which is about the middle of the draft there. So everything to the right of there is the history of their emissions since they've been selling power to RCEA. And the reason it's meaningful to separate out the biomass and non-biomass emissions is because those get counted differently in emissions accounting. So like the state's cap and trade doesn't count the biomass emissions that are the majority of the CO2 that the plant puts out. You'll notice that the non-biomass CO2 has decreased a lot in the last 5 years. And we've asked HSC about that, and they say that it's basically just due to upgrades they've made to controls at the plant that have made it a lot less frequent that they have to shut down and restart the plant. And the diesel fuel is associated with just restarting the plant when they have to do a cold start. So they've, just been able to greatly reduce the diesel use because it's not having to do as many cold starts after, unplanned or planned shutdowns. So the Biomass Technical Advisory Group shared with us, points of discussion when we met with them in June. Like I say, there were claims about the emissions increasing over time relative to energy production, but that did not appear to be the case from the data. We do see relatively low efficiency in production of both electricity and heat from this plant. If you look at it against sort of benchmarks of typical efficiencies of biomass plants, we believe that is likely to be due to just higher moisture content in the fuel. Like when you burn wet firewood in your home wood stove, you just don't get as much heat out of it. So we think that's part of the lower efficiency, along with just sort of the age of the plant. The use of diesel fuel, like I said, has been on the decline. There was discussion in BTAG about just what role, if any, RCEA should be holding or should play in holding Humboldt Sawmill Company to air quality regulations versus leaving that to the air district. And I will note that the air district does participate as part of the Biomass Advisory Group. So they're in the loop on this. And then we talked about how RCEA had collaborated with in the past with the air district on obtaining equipment that was originally provided by the California Air Resources Board for monitoring ambient air quality, in particular particulates in the vicinity of the plant. From what we gathered talking with the BTAG folks, most of them supported continuing to do this. There were concerns raised that purple air type sensor equipment doesn't pick up the smallest, most harmful particulate type, so we're not really getting the complete picture of harmful emissions. And there were requests that staff worked to look for correlations in emissions in the vicinity of Scotia with emissions elsewhere in the county, and also look at correlations between the in-stack monitoring that HSC is required to do versus the ambient air quality monitoring in the vicinity. These are not things we've really moved forward on. We just had a busy compliance season during the summer. So the staff that work on this have been taken up with other things the last couple of months, but we do intend to work on that in the fall. Later, we went to, I'll say earlier this month, we met with the Community Advisory Committee and got their input. We've been presenting this to them as an informational item in the past and this time around, and we just heard from them expressing a desire that they have it presented more as an action item to pass on recommendations to the board rather than just being an informational review. We heard from them that they also have the concerns that we heard in BTAG about just the inefficiency of the plant, and about the air quality sensors not necessarily giving us a complete picture of harmful emissions. They were interested to learn more about the Air District's engagement on this. And we talked about their parts of the Air District staff's participation in the BTAG. They were interested to learn more about Humboldt Sawmill Company's ongoing investigation of alternative biomass feedstock uses, and I have a slide that I'll get to on that in a second. And they talked about just that this whole MOU and the reporting that comes out of it is meaningful. We had one of the BTAG members just say that they really think that both HSC and the Air District are becoming more accountable to the public about the emissions, just with this public discussion that's happening. I just want to note Humboldt Sawmill Company's role in our power portfolio, which kind of continues to evolve as just the energy industry and regulations and everything around us continue to evolve. The round-the-clock nature of this resource makes it a really valuable kind of counterweight to the solar and wind resources, which are intermittent, that we're otherwise, continuing to procure as part of our 100% renewable portfolio that we're building towards. And with the shift to the slice of day resource adequacy framework that we've talked about in the past, that newer framework all the more emphasizes the value of having these baseload and or dispatchable resources, as opposed to just intermittent resources where you need to build out lots of storage or other resources to make those fit in your portfolio. Geothermal power is another example of a renewable but baseload type resource, so it's also really valuable. But new build geothermal, we've learned, is expensive and in limited supply. We've procured some of it through our participation in California community power, and it's definitely come at a price well above what we're paying for this local biomass power. The contract provides a number of products that we need: energy, renewable energy certificates, and resource adequacy. And in terms of affordability, we do every month with the Energy Authority, our portfolio managing support. We look at the different resources we have under contract, including HSC, and they basically just stack up those three resources, the energy and the renewable energy certificates and the resource adequacy, what it would cost to procure the same quantities of those on the market as what we're getting through this contract. And almost every month, the value of the contract shows as being in the money, more favorable financially than having to procure those resources at current market prices. It's not always the case, but most of the time that is the case. So just one last thing to just update on what HSC is doing on alternative biomass use. Their sister companies, Humboldt Redwood Company and Mendocino Redwood Company, are continuing planning for a two-phase project at MRC's plant in Ukiah, with the first phase being a small biomass cogen plant. So this would be similar to the Scotia plant, but a new build, so it would have to use best available control technologies for the emissions. And then the second phase would be to co-locate with that a gasification plant that would use heat coming from the phase one cogen plant, plus biomass feedstock to produce marketable hydrogen from that biomass. They're still kind of sharpening their pencils to figure out whether they're going to move ahead with that project, but they're still in the planning phases on it. So I'm happy to take any questions you have, and I can go back and revisit any of those slides if you want to look at any of the graphs again.
Thank you. Any questions? Natalie?
Do you have any sense of how I know we've talked in the past about how some of the boilers are a little older and the equipment in general is older. I was looking at the NOVs and there's a violation. It looked like boiler A has been a particular culprit, but I don't really have a frame of reference to compare how their system, you know, looks compared to others that are similar to it. Are there a higher number of violations around opacity or, you know, CO or as compared to other plants? Do you know that?
I don't know that. I would say that that wouldn't necessarily be an apples to apples comparison because the different air districts are going to have different, you know, kind of protocols for applying those as a violation. I don't think that, you know, they're using completely consistent standards. I would like to learn more though about how it compares with other plants. There was this kind of boom of building biomass plants back in the day when all three of our local plants got built, you know, in kind of the mid 80s through early 90s. Just because there was this, you know, new system in place for incentives, what they call qualifying facilities, could just be guaranteed and not get for their power that the utilities were required to buy power from them. So we had this kind of wave of plants, and as we know, two of those three plants are no longer operating. And the one that's remaining, you know, I think, you know, just kind of in terms of the life expectancy of thermal power plants, these are, you know, senior citizen power plants. And that's kind of true across California. There have been a modest number of new smaller plants built to take advantage of the bioenergy market adjusting tariff that we are now offering also, but which unfortunately looks like it's probably on its way out at the end of this year. So there's been more recent smaller plants that, you know, are no larger than 5 megawatts nameplate, only a fraction of the size of the Scotia plant. But yes, I would like to explore that more, just really how this plant compares against kind of its cohort elsewhere in California.
Yeah, and if I may, one more, I'm curious, you know, I didn't see in the reports, and maybe I missed it because there's a lot in these MOU reports for the year, but I didn't see much around whether there is a plan to invest in the plant to improve efficiency or to, you know, I saw the response that like the materials are covered for 2 weeks before they go through, you know, the process. So they're maybe drying out a bit, but given that there's some concerns around efficiency and violations, were there any efforts that the HSC is planning to improve on the efficiency of their plant?
There's actually, I mean, they've told us they've invested millions of dollars over the years since they've been under contract with us on replacing controls and replacing emissions equipment. I think actually alternate director Wheeler might be able to speak to some details of this more fully than I can, because I know his organization has been monitoring this closely, and we're party to the protest that was filed with the EPA. But my understanding is that they have been trying to work through a permitting process for deploying some new emissions controls as we speak.
You said it well. Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, we all know it's hard to hear, and I don't hear the best in the first place, but if I understood your first question was you were wanting to know how this plant compared to other plants of comparable. And one of the things about this plant, it's designed as a cogeneration plant, it was meant to extract steam.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really when it was built, one of the primary functions was to get steam from the plant at a 250-pound level. They extracted that and they ran it into a hydraulic debarker. And that steam ran this, which was just a big hydro jet that blew the bark off of the logs. Mm-hmm. And so that took up approximately almost 1/3 of the, along with the sawmill actually ran steam generated log carriages. And so one boiler of the 3 boilers was dedicated strictly to produce steam to go to the log debarker and to go also to the dry kilns, because they had a big amount of dry kilns that weren't the most efficient in the world. And so the big product they were really wanting to produce was steam. And that takes away from the efficiency without going into how turbines are built and how they work. But it takes away from the efficiency to produce the electricity. And so when you go to other plants, like say Wheelbrader over by Reading, they're in the Highway 36 ties into and brings power over here. When you go to those kind of plants, their primary objective is electricity. They're not trying to make as a product of steam. And so unless HSC went through and rebuilt those turbines to extract that electricity and bypass the extraction of the steam, which would be very expensive. And as Richard has said, they put their money into the efficiency of the air quality as well as they're talking about here with startup, so the better electrical control to make it more efficient and sustainable. And into the future, if they take care of this plant, if that's a question, I don't know if it was on your mind. If they take care of the plant, this plant will run longer than any of us will ever live or our kids will ever live. The plants that run the water plants that run the Hoover Dam for their internal electrical load runs off water, and that was done in 1939. And as long as they go through every so many years and rebuild your turbines and rebuild your processes, those machines will run, I would say, another couple hundred years. So it depends on how much they want to commit to keeping their plant running. And one way is that they're able to sell this power to the community and do what they're doing to get rid of their waste.
I think the question though is, can it be more efficient and cleaner?
Certainly, I'm not an expert on this, but it certainly could be. Now, whether that's whether that would, to rebuild those turbines to not be suited so much for steam, they still use steam for their dry kiln process. And so at a period of time when the plant was shut down, they didn't buy the steam that they needed to do their dry kilns. They had brought in an actual natural gas steam system boiler. And so that sat right on the property and supplied the steam to dry the kilns. And so when they came back to the idea that when they saw the cost of that, it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, roughly a month, that it was costing them for natural gas. And so that gas lines that brought in and fed that. And so they made the decision that there was a big idea to get that steam coming back out of that powerhouse, as long as all the other things that they were doing. They were paying to haul their fuel off. They were buying the electricity straight from PG&E. So when they brought the power plant back online, they were able to produce electricity. They didn't have to haul their fuel, and they were hauling it around locally from the mill to the power plant in trucks from one end to the other. Well, they built conveyors here. Well, it's not even back in the 2020 range. They built conveyors to move the sawdust and chips directly from the sawmill directly to the power plant. So they don't have the trucks doing that anymore. So they did some of these things rather than waste the money on diesel driving it to Reading or Bernie and where they were hauling. Whether or not they go the one step farther that I believe Natalie was asking about it, are they going to make these turbines to where they don't produce steam? They don't need the high level steam. They need the low level steam to go to the kilns. And the kiln and the drying the kiln lumber is a big feature that Humboldt Sawmill does, is they dry a lot of lumber and then run it through their planers as dried lumber. So that would be something you'd have to talk to the management. It's a good question. I would get them pinned down on it and see if you could get them to put something in writing in your MOU if they're going to do things to make the turbines more efficient away from steam. Thanks for that.
And just to that point, because I'm our CAC person, and so it was really interesting to see that discussion paired with also talking about the integrated power resource plan. Is that what it was? Or just like those long-term contracts that eventually we are going to be going after that are longer out than, this biomass contract. And there was a lot of discussion just around like what the future of biomass looks like in Humboldt County, and that if we aren't buying that energy, will they take these efforts to update these things to, attract other folks to, take up that contract, or are they gonna, focus on these projects that they're building down in Ukiah and put more energy into that. And just, thinking about what could replace that in our portfolio and all of that. And I don't, necessarily think we need to get into that discussion right now because we'd be here for hours. But, I just thought, thinking about that long-term planning coupled with, looking at all of these kind of both what's working and what's not working about what's happening at the biomass plant right now, was an interesting discussion. And so just kind of, asking that existential question of like, what is biomass in Humboldt going to look like after that contract is up? So.
Thank you.
Said this before, but I'll share it again. I think that the global picture of biomass at Humboldt sawmills is bigger than how efficient is the turbine generator system in terms of generating electricity. As Frank was mentioning, they have the conveyor system, they dry their lumber, they run the plant. They have the conveyor system, which eliminates the need to use trucks on site. They're utilizing all that waste right there on site, which eliminates the need to truck it to Anderson. I mean, there's just so many extraneous benefits that don't get factored in any way. And I don't want to say that I'm blind to the negative, but at the same time, I don't believe that all these secondary benefits and savings and conservation efforts are factored in to the piece of the picture that everybody sees. It's like, ooh, biomass is bad. There are, there's exhaust, there's particulates, there's these negatives. But I'd love to, and I don't know if anybody could or would ever run the numbers and do the equations that show us how that would compare to trucking all that waste, 200 miles to be dealt with somewhere else. Or, I mean, I know we have other potential future, ways of dealing with the waste locally. But, if that mill shuts down, and like Frank says, if they just buy grid energy to do all these things that they currently are doing with the energy they produce, that cost gets equalized out somewhere else. So it may not be the greatest thing for the air quality in the Scotia Basin. But in the broader picture, there's just so much more involved. So I hate that I mean, I don't want to just be so focused on air quality that that's the only piece we can see, because it's so much bigger.
Didn't we have a consultant at one point? I don't know if it was Shots Energy or someone that, it seemed like it was somebody separate from Shots that did some of this. They did some kind of a study for us that related to some of what she's asking. I don't know completely, but like to break down what the cost of diesel was to go and the effects of diesel in the atmosphere of trucks driving across to Anderson. But I thought we had somebody that did some of that for us.
I think you might be talking about the report that was prepared by Michael Furness.
Who?
Michael Furness?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we had him under contract. He looked at that as well as some local small hydroelectric power opportunities, and he did separate reports on those two topics. Those reports, we did have them posted on our website. I'm not completely positive that the biomass one is still live on our website since we rebooted, but I'll check and I'll ask if that can be made publicly available again if it has not survived the transition to the new website. But yes, he did have some findings, and he presented it as a mixed bag. I think a lot of the things that the board is saying this afternoon reflect a lot of the same points that he made, and that sort of weighing of the negatives of the air emissions versus the many benefits that the community does get from biomass production locally.
Richard, how much longer do we have the contract for estimates?
It's early 2031. I think February 2031 is when it runs out.
Is staff working on like a roadmap to find another resource to replace that if the board decides in 2021?
Ties back very nicely to what you heard from Jocelyn earlier. We are thinking about this solicitation and also thinking ahead to our integrated resource plan, which we'll be engaging the board on very soon. With that being one of the front of mind questions, we did already talk a little bit with the Community Advisory Committee about that earlier this month. Is when we look at, out into the 2030s and the time horizon for our integrated resource plan will be out through 2035. So that's, a few years past when the Scotia contract runs out. So we definitely do look at the board for input on, what happens there, whether it's, extending the Humboldt Sawmill Company contract or replacing it with a different resource with similar characteristics, which, as I've said, could be different biomass or could be geothermal power. We probably can't just replace it with solar because we know the limitations of that.
There was a mention about the particulates that were too small to measure. But we are measuring particulates within the area of the power source currently, correct?
Well, there's in-stack monitoring that's done.
I mean, ambient. Yeah.
Then there's the ambient measurements that are being done just at places. There was one ambient instrument that was already deployed before we got involved in the Scotia area, and then we deployed a couple more units there.
So we do have the data to make correlations already. Are we doing that?
Like I said, that's something that we need to do. We did some preliminary work on it. Our former power resources specialist, Joseph Sloan, did look at correlation between just when the plant was on and off versus what the particulate levels looked like at the instruments near it. And we did not see any correlation like saying, oh, okay, the particulates are higher when the plant is running versus when it's not. What we did see a very strong correlation to is just wildfire season. The particulates soared way higher when there were wildfires happening anywhere on the North Coast, basically, and the wind was blowing in the right direction or wrong direction. And so, but I won't say that was like, ironclad research. That was just sort of graphing up the numbers and looking at them. So I think we, if we want to do something more rigorous, if we were to make it public.
Yeah, Natalie.
I want to just make a couple comments. I mean, one is that it's pretty clear that if we don't buy this power and the RECs, someone else will. We did not buy the RECs recently, and they went to others on the market. I don't think that if RCEA were to change what we're doing, that we would shut this plant down, and it's part and parcel to the operation of the mill. They are inextricably interlinked because they're certainly not going to truck the waste. They're never going to truck the waste. It's not efficient or reasonable. So while I think it's good that they're not trucking that much sawmill waste, it's never a viable option financially, really, for them. So I would say what I'm asking about is more whether we have an opportunity to encourage investment in improvement of that facility, particularly emissions, in our relationship with the facility. And I've heard both that this is a facility that's near the end of its life and that it could go on forever. So I've heard both of those, both on the tour that we took. Like different people working at the plant said those same two things. One was, this machine could run for the rest of our lives. Just, keep it going. And then others saying like these components are near the end of their life. So if those components are near the end of their life and can be replaced with something that dramatically improves the air quality and addresses some of the concerns that our community members have, then I think, we should continue to push for that because we are in this relationship. I just don't know that any of our decisions are going to change the outcome of them producing biomass power and selling associated RECs and resource adequacy credits associated with that resource, because it's not solar and because it can kind of fill this gap. But I don't, and it's also in conversation, both on tours there and in the field, it was pretty clear that what I said earlier, that the sawmill can't afford to operate without the biomass plant. So it's, those two are inextricably interlinked. So I'm not, I think it's our role to decide whether Humboldt Redwood Company, how they operate their business, but the sawmill and the biomass are critically interlinked, and one couldn't subsist without the other. And that's making the financial reality for the sawmill and for the products that the company makes possible to be able to sell the biomass. So I think it's just good to be cognizant of that. I think we all know that, but I think going there makes it very obvious. And anyway, back to like, I would love to see if there are any opportunities we have to encourage those efficiency improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting, this conversation about lines of leverage. And I mean, that's the first one. If somebody else is going to buy it, as long as that mill continues to operate within its permits, that's not something that, you know, it seems like that would be a sort of a non-starter when it comes to whether or not we as the power purchasing entity have leverage to impact the operations of the plant. But then also the offsets and efficiencies that we're talking about when it comes to the reduction in diesel emissions, the reduced cost of trucking, the other things that the mill has done to increase their efficiencies. I mean, that is commendable, but Director Arroyo started to address this as well, but that was my question, is what is the viability of, how tied is the viability of the mill to the operations of the plant? But it does seem like, whether it's from a permitting perspective, given that the emissions would change dramatically if that plant wasn't operating at the mill itself, or also from an economic perspective, it doesn't seem like it would be potentially a healthy operation without those savings. So, I think it is interesting to consider, what position RCEA is in to, essentially encourage those changes. And those seem like both those lines of leverage seem to be the place to start. But I don't know that there's been these analyses made or that data shared in regard to just how interdependent those entities are. Unless somebody's seen that. Did they mention something like that, Director Arroyo, to you?
Oh, a willingness to make improvements?
No, like any data in regard to actual data in regard to the interconnectedness between the mill's health and the power plant?
One gentleman just said they couldn't function without each other. It doesn't make financial sense for them to dispose of all the mill waste any other way. At one time, they were using the steam to heat all the homes in the town, but now they're not doing that anymore. And
yes,
it just doesn't make logical sense to me that they could function any other way. It wouldn't be viable. It's already apparently a pretty tight financial operation. So I mean, our position is whether or not in 6 years we decide to buy power again, and in the meantime, how we hold our, local provider to the agreements that we have made and to the contract that we have in place, which I think we have very little room for leverage in, frankly. That's my take on it. But, so I think my take on how we could get improvements is through relationship and asking for that. And I don't know that they're necessarily, folks in the community probably disagree about the compliance issues. I don't see any evidence that we can use the compliance issues as major leverage personally.
Okay.
Maybe others.
I think the only thing would, if they changed the rules to make it that it was not operational at the air quality management district or the state level, right? And then the solution is like climate bond money pays to make it efficient that it could still operate under new rules. I mean, that's like the only leverage that I think it exists.
Climate bond money to pay for hardware improvements.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea what those are? Are there technologies that could even be considered in this context? Scrubbers of some, I mean, we don't know, right?
That's that would be for compliance, for air quality, it would be.
So one conversation seems to be about efficiency, and there's the other conversation about particulate matter. Scrubbers, more advanced scrubbers would deal with the particulate matter and not the efficiency. It might actually reduce the efficiency. And I think we care about both because efficiency is related to another pollutant, greenhouse gases. So the less efficient we are, the worse we are at turning BTUs into electrons, the more greenhouse gas intense all the energy produced is going to be. And so I think that we as RCEA should care about both. One thing as a data gap that would be useful for RCEA to continue to invest in is that ambient air quality monitoring with the understanding that the purple air quality monitors are not picking up the below 2.5 micrometer particulate matter. So that is, the smaller the particulate matter, the deeper into lungs the particulate matter can get, the kind of more devastating the health impacts are. So if we don't have good data about that, then I don't think we have good data about the impacts of the biomass plant on human health in the Scotia area.
It seems like there's obviously, we know there's been a lot of community concern. There's a lot of missing data. And so it'd be best if we had a partner organization and it wasn't completely on RCEA, I think, to produce this data. But if there wasn't that opportunity, I agree we should be, creating that data and making it available.
Just read through.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. What you're saying, there's Mr. Wheeler saying one thing. There's two different things. Is that one is the air quality and two is the efficiency of the lifelong efficiency of it. Humboldt Redwood, I'm not in the boardroom to tell you what they do or don't know. They know, in my opinion, whether or not they need that mill to run that and that power plant to be together and be successful. My opinion would be yes, they do. Whoever told you that was from a common sense point of view. The two are designed to be together in the way that sawmills work. And I don't know, except for doing this for 40 some years, I don't know much about it. But the other thing is they can rebuild those mills. As I said, Hoover Dam is still efficiently running their internal load, not the load they ship out to Las Vegas and LA. They have turbines that are on the Colorado River that run the power that supplies the power to turn the lights on inside Hoover Dam. Those turbines are actually some of the same vintage that's in the old power plant at Palco. And they were built in 1939, and they will continue to live as long as people want to. They have giant machine shops that build this and replace this stuff and repair it. Is that economically feasible? That's a business decision that Humboldt Sawmill Company has to make. If we decide as a organization that buys the power, we don't want to buy the power, they'll sell that power to somebody. It'll go in. It goes in the grid right now. It doesn't. It goes up in the grid and it gets distributed just like this stuff down on that Fields Land. And the power goes up, and you've heard me go on about this before. That those electrons will be sold to somebody, and whether they make money on them or not is up to them. And so I don't see where RCEA has the leveraging power as this entity as big as we are. We're not that huge. And if we can take it up at a later date, unless you get Humboldt Redwood to really give you the information that you're wanting, or you find somebody that's smart enough to figure that out, who knows what they're doing, and I wish you all the luck in the world to go find that consultant and pay $1 million to them and get a truthful answer that's correct, or just get a bunch of BS. That's something RCA probably ought to take up at another time and give some thought to both of these questions. It's not a simple 1, 2, 3 answer. It really is.
Thank you, Frank. I think Heidi, do you have a question? You had your hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, just a comment. I don't know if it was a year or a year and a half ago, but I know that there was a representative that came to our board of directors and provided a presentation, and it was very clear to me during the presentation that there was like real data was missing. So I just want to kind of underscore Michael and Natalie's request to actually engage in some research to analyze the data that's not being picked up by the purple air quality. I believe we said a year and a half ago to the members of the public that we were concerned about it then, and I feel like we need to engage action to move that forward.
Thank you. I know we'll be talking about this some more.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I agree. I think we need better air quality data about the, smaller particulate matter. And that would be wonderful to have. I don't know what the cost is because the purple air monitors are really cheap and other devices are less cheap. So they're significantly more expensive. So I don't know what the viability of that is or where they would be placed or any of that. I'd be interested to hear more. I think the question about whether the plant can be more efficient and whether there can be air scrubbers is an ongoing, essentially a conversation. And I don't know what the receptivity is to doing it with the efficiency piece. Maybe it's making the plant last longer and making the sawmill therefore, and it's accompanying operation, something that can be a viable alternative for longer. Maybe there's a real financial incentive to replace the turbines or do efficiency improvements. But with the emissions, I remember asking at the tour if there was ever going to be additional scrubbers put in and was just told it was too cost prohibitive. Now, if we're the customer and we're all locals and have at least some degree of relationship and connection to folks there, I would imagine it's more compelling to hear from the local community representatives that they're, our community members really want to see this versus if we were to not be the customer and someone else was buying the power. Who doesn't even live here? So that's my only thought about how we could use a relationship in any kind of meaningful way. I don't necessarily think it's financially on the table, but I don't think it hurts to continue to ask if the scrubbers could be implemented. So.
I mean, I think if we're a biomass supporting entity, and I think I don't know that that's been established, but and we're hearing from staff that this is a great piece as far as energy reliability, resource adequacy, round the clock production. It should be investigated further. If there was some sense that it was something to support and that it might lead to support past the current agreement. Because 6 years is probably not enough time to make the money back to make improvements, nor something that probably we would want to pay for within that period of time. But I mean, I don't know, this starts to become an expensive proposition to start to look into the engineering prospects of potential changes and what that would mean to address the concerns that everyone has. So I don't know that that's really for us or not, but I think that might be something to consider, whether, preparing now for, what's going to happen in 6 years and whether or not there's any reason to even discuss, keep discussing that potential.
So I want to say something, but I'm not
One
going.
of the things,
I can see the faces from staff.
well, one of the things related to relationship that Natalie's talking about, I could be so far off base, but I'm just going to throw it out there. So for the heavy lift terminal project, they are required to engage in station efforts for like carbon credits that they're needed. Now, I think they're looking at acquiring property and doing regulation on property, but I wonder if improvements to a facility such as the Biomass plant could potentially count towards some carbon credit capture. Anyway, I could be totally off base. My brain just kind of made that connection.
Okay.
What?
Yeah, I know, skip out the question. One, last one.
What actually it's saying makes too much sense. We should push to measure and push from our board for efficiency.
Some future.
So can I just say one thing here, which is that this is a federally regulated source. And so any upgrades to or changes to the facility will trigger what's called Title V, is the air quality permit that it holds, will trigger a Title V renewal process. Frank, I don't know if you ever were involved in these, but that's a very long process. And it's not even guaranteed that they're going to get to the other side of that. And so I think to the comment over here about it's, for just 6 years left of the existing contract, they may not want to put in all of this. So I do think, your only leverage is the relationship. You have no leverage in your contract. The MOU is a remarkable, I think, piece of cooperative community collaboration. But there's no legal obligation for the company to be at the table doing any of this. And so it really is using your current relationship as best you can to learn what you can, and then to also start the conversation about whether this entity would consider purchasing additional biomass way down the road so that they know whether this is an investment that in the community that they want to make.
You're talking about wanting to buy biomass?
Yeah, and I agree with everybody that said they're going to sell it. There's no problem. But there appears to be a desire to be part of the community by selling locally because they're sitting at the table, engaged in this MOU. And so that's good for them. But in 6 years' time, they'll have another buyer. And so they can just simply say, we're done with you guys if we don't want to be part of this anymore.
I mean, if they're going, if that's true, and they'll continue to operate after the end of our agreement, they're working for somebody else. That's I would say worst case scenario, because the relationship and the leverage are compromised. The only other option is like they decide to stop, right? So I think that you know, I don't have an opinion about this yet. I'm just saying that we should look at it from these perspectives to determine what will be the best case outcome for not just RCEA, but for for community health. And if it means longer term relationship and a higher price, that's probably a better outcome than, you know, status quo and RCEA losing any leverage it might have now due to them selling to somebody else.
I think also the bigger thing, if I was to have a concern on a bigger picture, the bigger picture is whether or not this sawmill can continue as a sawmill.
Yeah.
With the way our timber industry is and the United States timber industry versus Canada, and what we're doing and how long the lumber industry is viable with all of the things that are, everything's upside down in as far as this economy stuff with what they're doing. And so their money isn't based on whether or not they sell electricity or not. Their viability is based on the value of timber and whether timber is a viable option. And that would be my bigger concern. And so for us to make a decision as RCA, as he's pointed out, 6 years, there's a lot that can happen in 6 years. And so it needs to be on our radar. And if we can, that's your department. If you can find someone that is viable enough to give us some really good information, or if you could be confident with HRCs, I keep saying HRC, but HSC, giving you the inside scoop, I really wouldn't know. They're going to tell you.
Yeah. I think there's some future agenda items here.
Future agenda items.
So,
and you want to move on, you got to.
Yeah, I can do my best to summarize. So I think, Dr. Wilson, to your longevity question, I think we try to ask that when we meet with them, you know, and they're willing to share to a certain extent. I think what I've heard from those meetings is they also have concerns over longevity, not just the sort of nuts and bolts of the plant operating, but more to what you just spoke about of the economic viability. So I don't think that, you know, I don't know how much more they're willing to share about that than is already sort of like public information in the sense of like, you know,
Why do we
these are
redact
struggles of the industry that's
our stuff in these papers?
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you.
They're
not going to tell you that.
So yeah, I don't know how productive those conversations would be of sort of like, other than just like these broader economic indices that you've mentioned and sort of the story from there. I will say there's things we could look at doing. You know, one of the things that occurred to me when I first came on board is, you know, why aren't we more of a partner in figuring out how to improve this plant? Could we not just sort of, it seems like we're kind of on the sidelines of that. And part of that is we have a power purchase agreement that puts us into a particular relationship with this plant. So if we're going to potentially support this plant in some way other than just a typical power purchase relationship, we need to establish that in a different way, because we have other power purchases agreement that we wouldn't offer that same extension of sort of ancillary services, if you will. I would argue that this is a pretty unique circumstance. It's a pretty interesting resource for our community. It has a lot of benefits beyond just what the power that we're getting in terms of jobs value. It also has all the concerns, right? Like we're concerned about the carbon emissions from the plant. So I would like to explore that a little more. What might that look like? And is there a way to take what is like a more typical power purchase agreement and think about how would we partner and what might that look like? I don't know if it's feasible, but we could investigate that. And if that is has any bearing in sort of how they might view, their long-term plans. I don't think that I will come back soon with much definitive information about that, but I think it's worth starting those conversations and thinking if there is a path forward along those lines and what our, liability would be in doing something like that. Is it okay? We have a lot of conversations. Nancy, I haven't been looking her way to see if her eyes are getting really big, but I think, it's worth exploring, and especially in light of what I've heard here today.
The other thing I'm hearing loud and clear is, is regarding the air quality data. And I think that, we've always been kind of reluctant to step into that space. We have an air quality monitoring district. We want to make sure that, we're relying on that information. But I think we can at least explore what it would look like to measure this, lower than 2.5 microns for the PM10 or PM 2.5. I think that we could at least bring back what that might look like. I can't guarantee that we can afford to do it or that we could implement that, but at least explore what that might, could be and bring that back for further discussion. That
Thank
hit?
you. Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. Let me go to public comment. Is anybody here from the public like to comment? Anybody online? Okay. I think that's it. Any further discussion? No?
We could consider in the future having an ad hoc to enter into these conversations, although it sounds like in a way staff would be most appropriate. We do have this PPA in place and but should there be interest down the line because of this unique relationship, it could be an opportunity to just find out if any of these are even if there's even any interest in talking further about it. And maybe having, board members involved, I don't know, you have a little bit more regular connections with them as staff, so maybe you'll have a better sense of that. But I mean, I think it really is kind of a bigger picture question about if they're going to be operating long-term in our community, do we want to be in kind of this relationship where we incentivize and work together on something that we think improves things long-term? Or do we want to do what many of our community members are asking us to and get out at the earliest opportunity? I mean, those are two very binary choices. And I can see the merits of actually kind of working together, which is very different from what we've been pushed to do. So, I'm feeling that tension. I'm sure the rest of you are too.
I mean, at least for me, that binary, the basis of the binary falls apart when or it seems like the assumption is that if RCA pulls out, the plant stops. We're finding that that's probably not the case.
That's not correct. Budget, how much do you want to bet? I don't have a lot of money, but I'll take it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll move on to new business study session on data center, local, state, national impacts. Regulatory and legislative policy manager, Faith RCEA.
I will do my best to this brief. It is a pretty meaty topic. So we're gonna kind of zoom in as we go. We're gonna start with what is a data center, and then go national, California, PG&E, Humboldt, individual data center. And then I think that what spurred this is an ask from the board related to, there's a lot of headlines been out there related to data center load growth and their impact, the grid. So yeah, hopefully this answers questions that you all have related to. So first, what is a data center? A data center is a facility that houses computer systems. It could be a room, it could be a building, it could be an entire campus. But on an average size data center that is seen in the US right now coming online is between 30 to 50 megawatts, which is about 25,000 to 50,000 homes. For reference, Sandrini Solar is 100 megawatts. So this is about half of a Sandrini in terms of capacity. Data centers generally, not all, but generally run 24/7. And because of that, prefer to connect to baseload power. Sources of baseload power would include coal, natural gas, nuclear, geothermal, and biomass. Some data centers use on-site diesel backups, and others will use hydrogen backups as well. So because of this, there is a little bit of a spurring of nuclear development. Tennessee Valley Authority is the first in the US that signed a PPA for a new nuclear reactor technology explicitly for a data center. We're also seeing that data centers are siting near natural gas pipeline infrastructure. So that way they can connect their facility with an on-site natural gas plant rather than contracting with an off-site plant. We're seeing examples of that in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Florida, North Carolina, and other states. And we're also seeing new pole infrastructure pop up for data centers. There's been some data centers in Texas that have deployed temporary coal microgrids, and the temporary nature of those facilities has allowed for faster permitting. But some data centers are attempting to be renewable and have carbon capture studies. And then the one pictured here is a data center in Luleå, Sweden, which is actually powered by hydropower. And you're probably wondering why they need so much power, and that has to do with cooling systems. There's two main types of cooling systems that data centers use. One is evaporative cooling, which is much more high use. And the other is air cooling, which is a higher energy use methodology. I'll kind of go into how much water or power an individual AI query uses on their side. So there's been a variety of projections thrown out there for how much data center load this can expect. This graph is from a Department of Energy July 2025 resource adequacy report, which largely focuses on reliability needed for expected data center load growth. And the projections in that report vary from 33 gigawatts to 109 gigawatts, with 50 being the median metric seen. Other figures that I've seen is that there could be a 15% increase year over year in data center load growth, or that figure can vary to 2.3%. So because of that substantial load growth, there is a need for grid development to both grid development and resource development to match up with the pace of data center growth to avoid reliability risks. So to quantify reliability risks, there's a term called loss of load expectation. And that measures the risks of outages driven by insufficient resource adequacy. So that's like if there's not enough power coming on, not if there's a disconnection to a distribution line or a transmission line. That's a separate type of outage. This is kind of like if there's not enough water pressure to support a house with a family of 5 versus a house with a family of 1. So you want to make sure that your resources online match up with the load. So our current system targets for 1 day of outages related to insufficient resource adequacy or loss of load expectation for every 10 years. That's about 2.4 hours a year of loss of load. Now, the system as a whole isn't meeting this target at the current moment in time. We are seeing 8.1 hours a year of loss of load. But the forecast, if all of this data center load materializes, would be 100 times increase of loss of load expectation. And that's, like I said, not including additional outages from transmission and distribution line losses. It's just from insufficient resource adequacy. So that would bump us up to 8.1 hours a year. From 8.1 hours a year to 10 days a year of total outage duration, which could affect more than 10 individual calendar days. So there's been a lot of discussion about if there is a risk to scheduled resource retirements and consideration for existing natural gas and other legacy power plants to stay online to avoid such a substantial loss of load. Do you want to say something a little optimistic on this slide? Because I know it's a little doom and gloom. California's reliability in this report looks pretty good. If California's expected data center load growth comes online, we should see about 3 to 7 hours per year of loss of load. So when you're planning for where data centers will come online, you want to make sure that you're being pretty accurate to which state they are in, and not just which state they are in, but which part of the state they are in, so that you can cite resources appropriately. There's a pretty big risk that data centers that are planned for might not get built at all, or might just be somewhere else. So when planning for that, and that comes from the fact that data centers are really sophisticated, like large tech conglomerates a lot of the times, and can shop around for where there's the fastest permitting pipelines or the fastest resource connection pipelines or the fast or lowest energy prices. We want to make sure that we have these forecasts correct because load forecasts drive individual load serving entity compliance requirements. So for RCEA, that would drive our RPS, renewable portfolio standard compliance requirements, our resource adequacy requirements, and our IRP requirements, among other programs. And then that would drive procurement, ultimately cost towards us. Also drives transmission distribution planning and rate design. And if we sink costs into developing facilities to serve these large data centers and they do not appear, we will still have to pay for those costs. The California Energy Commission is exploring this through scenario planning. And it's still in its fairly early stages. There's an active initiative related to it. Okay, PG&E. So from a February report to the CEC, PG&E stated that they're currently expecting 5.5 gigawatts of data centers in their territory by 2035. So some of these will require new transmission infrastructure, and the current model for how new transmission infrastructure is paid for in California and in many other states is that those costs are kind of paid for by kilowatt hour usage across all customers. But when there's a really large customer coming online, like a data center or other large manufacturing facility, and then they do not appear, there's policy concerns related to requiring all customers to pay for that. So because of that, PG&E has submitted an application to the California Public Utilities Commission for a new Rule 30 tariff, which would allow them to collect from the large customer upfront the marginal cost for new transmission to serve that large customer. And that's related to large customers over 1 megawatt. It's not exclusive to data centers. It could include like a factory, a port facility, large agriculture. So it's a pretty broad scope on that one. I do want to note that the new rate structure for Rule 30 that PG&E is developing does not apply to generation rates. It's just transmission and distribution. So generation planning for large loads is still a topic to be debated. Okay, zooming in even more, Humboldt County, we're almost there. So right now, we are not aware of any large data centers in Humboldt County at this time. I want to caveat that by saying that large data center is a relative term. If there was a large data center that was coming to Humboldt County, we would learn about it through either the Rule 30 information sharing. PG&E has sent us data related to large loads, local agency engagement, CEC's load forecasting, or the Office of GOVIS at the Governor's Office. We do also ask the board if you're aware of any large new facilities coming online in your respective jurisdictions. Please flag those for us. It doesn't have to be just a data center. Anything big that RCEA may need to plan for. And as for how we are going to structure our generation rates, as it stands right now, we have 2 rate structures that are under consideration. In 2021, the RCEA board approved a non-standard rate, which could be a custom negotiated rate for extra large loads at over 7 million kilowatt hours a year. And the state also has an economic development rate. So this is for customers that are flagged by the Office of GOVIS as necessary for economic development. This could be new or existing customers that are deemed as essential for the California economy or for local economy. RCEA staff is working on developing a RCEA specific version of this rate as well. So for a single data center, and a single AI search, I want to focus on what the current impact is and how we can reduce that. So before I get into that, there's a quick clarification that the load impacts of data centers and AI are at the data center and not at the customer site. So when you're conducting an AI search, yes, there's a small amount of load that's related to your computer, but most of this that's referenced is related to the power at the data center itself. So for Google Gemini, an average AI query uses 0.24 watt hours of electricity. That goes up to 0.3 watt hours for an average research. There's also a usage for Gemini of 0.03 grams of carbon dioxide that's emitted and 0.26 millimeters of water, or about 5 drops. If you individually want to lower your contribution to this, you could consider a default search engine that does not incorporate AI automatically. There are some out there where you can toggle that setting on and off, so that you're not automatically contributing to this. But the onus shouldn't entirely be on the customer, and there are efforts to reduce load by individual data centers. According to Google, their Gemini engine is now 33 times more efficient in May 2025 as compared to May 2024. Data centers also can participate in demand response. They can modulate when they are doing their AI training to hours of the day when renewables are more available. They also can have on-site backup generation, including renewable generation. And then also there are some algorithms for AI that are more efficient, but marginally slower, that can be used in certain times of the day as well. And I wanted to end on kind of an optimistic note. So I wanted to talk about beneficial uses of AI in the energy sector. So there's in energy efficiency and demand response, there are smart technologies and smart controls out there. Some of these are more like scheduling your air conditioner, which are more manual, but there are others that are based on grid conditions. There is also in grid planning, Plexus is a software that's used in federal and state grid planning and has an AI component to it. For grid monitoring, SoCal Edison has recently announced the usage of a software that they call Aware, which uses artificial intelligence and substation level sensors with machine learning to identify, categorize, and predict grid faults before catastrophic failure. The California Independent System Operator, which is the state's transition planner, they are exploring the use of artificial intelligence related to management of generator outages. Power plants have to schedule when they go down so they can conduct maintenance. So it's important that we make those decisions in a way that is efficient. And there is also use in research planning, which is kind of related to data research. There's also softwares out there that are used for citing of parcels that may be suitable for renewable resource development. Now, I'll close there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Natalie.
Are there any efforts to basically like turn off features that are AI features for like people's phones or search engines if we basically don't have enough power to go around? Have you heard of any, like, is that like from like a regulatory perspective?
I have not. I have heard that there are some individual organizations that use a more energy efficient but slower algorithm in times when grid conditions are constrained. But I think that's more economically driven based on their energy costs.
I was thinking like the CPUC might be like, hey, like you just can't use these tools if people can't get enough power to live their daily lives. I don't know if that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
Seems back to
Capitalism, you know?
just too hopeful, you all.
Yes.
Then the private tech businesses would have to have an interest in the public good, and I don't.
I guess, okay, so there is, ISO will issue flex alerts in times of grid constraint. And there's similar structures for individual IOUs as well, where you as a company can sign on, it's usually large manufacturers, to modulate your load when one of these alerts comes out. And there's usually a financial incentive.
More questions?
Just probably a comment,
Right.
First of all, I appreciate your research and your report. My concern that I still want to address, and I don't know if from what she said, if it's actually be able to do it, but we're out trying to buy long-term contracts. But there's a point, I'd probably not in the immediate near future, but there's gonna come a point where with what I want to understand is the pace that AI requires to do things, that it's gonna take away the availability of power to purchase, i.e. RCEA wants to buy, we want to buy power to put into our contracts. And is there a place where that commodity becomes so valuable because there's a shortage of it that it goes up? And so just being a small CCE, the other somebody that's a bigger CCE can afford to buy it, or PG&E can afford to buy it, or Elon Musk. He already has in one of his plants where he builds cars, he's got a plant next to it that runs off fossil fuels. That is huge. I think it's in the byte, not gigabytes, but gigawatt. And that is powered by fossil fuel, and yet he's making a electric car, which is saving the environment. Kind of like when the director Savins, I get your name wrong, Safani came up. We're putting hydrogen powered buses in Humboldt County, but we have to ship the hydrogen into Humboldt County on diesel trucks. Now, I don't know if that's a kind of a little bit of an irony there, or there's some kind of but I see the same thing taking place with Mr. Musk. If he's building electric cars to be efficient, and at the same time, the power, the building that he's taking to do that, he's using fossil fuels to do it. And my concern is there a place in time where RCA is faced with our ability to purchase the RECs and the megawatts? They become so high priced, as we've seen in the past with the REC. They were 8 times what they ought to be. And so is there a place where we're priced out? If we have a 20-year contract, well, then we're good for 20 years. If we don't, then we're not. And it's probably not a question that's going to happen in the next 6 years, but or probably not even in my lifetime. So thank you for your report.
And if I could just follow, I think the answer is yes, that is absolutely a concern. And I think it's not just the data centers that are, the competitiveness coming in, all these federal factors that are influencing cost and availability as well. Permitting timeframes, all of these headwinds are creating a very, very challenging environment in addition to the data center demand. So it's really, critical time in the next, few years to be able to proceed and, figure out our path.
Can we get these slides sent to us perhaps? They've slides. Absolutely. There were some of those like numbers and just little pieces of data that would be nice to have. Okay, perfect, even better.
Yeah. And Lori send them out.
Yeah. And then just like light soapbox, but really the opportunity is to realize that this is going to be a major constraint both to our grid, to our environment, right? And that the regulatory piece is what's going to be important. It is a new technology that is being over speculated rampantly, coming online with little regulation. And, it's like reminiscent of the kind of like robber baron capitalism that we were seeing in like the late 1800s. And now we have to do it all over again and decide how we are going to regulate it as government entities and figure out, how can we get people or get these data centers to lower, their usage when we're in times of grid constraint, things like that. And so it's going to have to be, maybe not the onus of us at our local government, but working, with our state and federal legislatures to be able to like rein this in, because it is gonna go and run.
Speaking of legislators, on Tuesday of next week, the Blue Lake Rancheria is hosting some of the commissioners from the CPUC. Now, specifically for a tribal right-of-way conversation. But if anybody from RCEA is available to attend, it'd be an interesting opportunity to talk to them about this conversation. So you're more than welcome. It's 9:30 to 4:30 at the Sapphire Palace.
Thank you. Yeah,
Eileen will be participating in that as well.
you will be.
Eileen will be, I will be gone.
Awesome. Any further questions? Thank you, Faye. Public comment, anybody in the room or comment? Can be online. All right, thank you. Item 12, staff report.
Hey, yeah, I'll try my best to get through this in a hurry. Okay, so quick update on the Foster Avenue solar ribbon cutting. We had a different date. We had to change the date, so it's now on October 7th. We've heard from a number of you that you can't make it, which I'm very sorry. We had a really, really difficult time scheduling this with the developer and some of the other factors. So we're sort of stuck with this date at this point, but it is absolutely worth celebrating. So we want to take the time to do that. But you should have invites for that. If you can make it, we'd love to have you. We have a couple items coming in the future. I wanted to just give updates about. We had some interest in hearing more about virtual power plants. We have secured or partnered with some capstone students from Cal Poly that are interested in diving into that. So we're going to let them kind of run with it. Richard is helping with that, and you know, they'll kind of cap their capstone off with a presentation to the board. So just to know that that's on our radar. We had some questions last meeting specifically about what's going on with our reduced load and sort of why are we seeing that? So we've really started digging into that. So we'll come back with a presentation on that with our findings also next month. The virtual power plant will be a little further down the line. And then we have a number we participated in a number of presentations and outreach events. We were at the Eureka Chamber, spent 2 days at North Country Fair, and then just yesterday we're in Humboldt for the Food for People event. And I'd add to this also that on Tuesday, Richard and I presented at the City of Blue Lake describing the memorandum of understanding we have with them regarding exploring energy storage at the old Ultra Power site. It's a memorandum that's been around, I think, since 2003, but we just were able to give the City Council an update about what that is and why we entered into it. So that is added to this. And then upcoming for October, we'll be doing some presentations for the Yurok Tribe Housing Authority, and then also be at the Fortuna Apple Harvest Festival. There's an electric vehicle ride and drive event. This is really meant to spur kind of the people's interest in electric vehicles. They can go and drive one if they want to. We are not spearheading that event, but we will have a table and be helping with that. And then, of course, the ribbon cutting that I mentioned. And then I did want to, you heard during Faith's presentation about the Cademo project receiving funding in the budget, the state budget, which is really exactly what we were hoping was going to happen. So, if you'll recall, we had an ad hoc committee that helped approve the loan terms for that project. And what we did was submit those loan terms and a draft escrow agreement for the interconnection deposit to PG&E on time, the deadline that was really constrained at the time. And since then, PG&E has had it under their purview to review that escrow agreement. And we have not, we're still waiting kind of for their comments and questions. So essentially we put a pin, application is submitted, and we're just, we haven't, I guess the bottom line is we haven't actually posted any money yet. So we are waiting to find out. Now that this is sort of earmark is in there, it will be administered by the CEC, the California Energy Commission. We really don't know yet how we get a hold of these funds or how the Cademo project gets a hold of these funds, what the timing will be on that. So we'll be reporting more on that. But as of now, just to keep you updated, we're in good standing with PG&E, have not actually posted any funds yet, and more to come on how we, those funds flow down that were in budgeted. I just want to say that the Cademo team has been incredibly grateful. And I wanted to express that to the board as well, just to kind of have that lifeline extended. It really was what we were trying to do, was get the state to step in and, kind of bolster the project. And that's exactly what's happened. So yeah, I feel really grateful that we could do that. And then just also final reminder, we're going to be back downstairs next month. So we're all kind of feeling the inability to hear in this room. And we're going to go with, it's more important to hear what we're saying than to see everybody together. If you remember, those pillars were kind of what drove us up here in the first place, that we couldn't see each other in that room. And it was a little bit awkward setup. But it seems better to, deal with that than deal with, not being able to hear each other clearly. So trying it again, we've also, buying some equipment that should help us, but it'll take a little bit for that to get here. So just remember, if you walk in here and you don't see us, just head downstairs. That's it for me.
Thank you. And any questions? Or comment? I think we're still the same here. All right. Anybody have public comment?
Yeah,
Please.
thank you. My name is Jan Kreppling. I'm retired from Humboldt State University Journalism Department. I used to work in the city of Arcata and helped form Access Humboldt, among some other things. Two interesting facts before I begin. I don't know if you've heard, but Humboldt County by itself sequesters 10% of all the carbon emissions in the entire state of California. Huge. And it's not, we don't have the cars here, but it's the temperate rainforest here that does it, which is amazing. And but emission control or carbon emissions, if you break down where the sources of them are, it's 40% through home heating, 40% through automobile and truck transportation and those things. And if you keep going down, it's 2% by rail, even though all the things that are shipped by rail. And that's what I wanted to talk about. First off, I support windmills. I think that's a great idea and it should be used and things. But please do not ship the power down to San Francisco. They should just set up their own closer to them. It's easier to do. It's a waste to transmit it that far. You have to have like a mile on each side of the cable going down. So that's a terrible thing for the fishermen and things. And what we should do here is develop windmill technology, because what's in the city of Eureka makes very good presentation of what's happening, because they've improved them tremendously. It used to be like 10 or 20 years ago, the cost of building a windmill was hours you put out the entire lifetime. That's how ridiculous it is. But now it's gotten much more efficient. And the bigger they are, the better they are, apparently. So I think the thing to do in Humboldt County and with you folks is to please develop them, test out different ones and try them out. Have some here that we could have off coast, but develop them and see what works the best. They're coming up with some new ones that are not even blades. They're like wimping pole or something like that. I don't know what it was. It was Dr. Google, so may or may not be true. But and then the other thing is, please, on the days that we are having sacred days, ceremonial days, no activity whatsoever. Whatever construction or whatever you're doing, moving anything, nothing. That's the least they deserve for getting an Indian Island back. And but thanks. And I'm a rail advocate, because rail is pretty big. Rail did really build this place too, between the bay and the rail being able to move stuff in now. That's one of the things that made Humboldt County great and could continue to do so. And rails are getting more efficient than ever. Germany is going to be zero carbon emissions from their rail system by 2030 or something like that. And they're using gas, I forget what exactly, but they don't fill up the thing. They stop every 40 or 50 miles and refill, or 100 miles, whatever it is, and refill their engines and then go up. So I live in Freshwater. I've lived in Freshwater for over 50 years. The rail went right through there, I was Redwood. So anyway, thanks. So please consider that. I think that's great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for coming. All right, and last thing is future agenda items. Anybody have anything? I think we do have a couple that you mentioned. Anybody else? No? All right, that's the case. We'll adjourn. Next meeting is Thursday, October 23rd, 3:30 downstairs in the Wharfinger.
Yes.